in a noisy auction room where every living creature was judged by a glance. It walked in. A limping dog, scarred and battered, its eyes cast down as if it had long forgotten what love felt like. The whole room laughed, scoffed, and turned away, as if its very existence had never held any meaning. But just as every gaze moved on, one person stood up, said nothing, made no bid, just nodded, a silent nod. Yet it changed the entire life of an animal and a human being forever. And if you want to know what was behind that look, listen closely, because this isn't just a story about an abandoned dog. It's a story about memory redemption and a quiet kind of love strong enough to pull two broken lives back together. In the noisy crowd of the auction house, a fragile figure appeared at the doorway. It was a German shepherd, but not the strong, noble kind people were used to seeing. This dog stumbled quietly through the entrance, its gait unsteady, dragging its hind leg with great effort. Its body was covered in wounds, raw and inflamed with old scars etched deep into its flesh, as if time and pain had carved them in layer by layer. It didn't whine, didn't bark, didn't even try to run. It simply stood there, silent eyes fixed on the ground, as if it had accepted its fate, as if it no longer believed in what might come next. The dog's condition resembled that of a broken object beyond repair. The crowd looked at it like something useless, discarded. Auction-goers shook their heads, eyes cold, devoid of even the slightest compassion. Hopeless case. Someone muttered, "This dog isn't worth a penny." Another added, "No one's going to buy it, it's just a burden." The entire animal market seemed to pause. All eyes turned toward the weakened creature, but no one truly saw it. It was just another lifeless thing, a soul stripped of value in the eyes of the crowd. Whispers rippled through the air, indifferent and unjust remarks, slicing through the silence like blades, sharp, cold, and cruel, cutting deeper into the dog's presence. Loneliness and abandonment wrapped around that animal like a shroud, yet still it stood. No resistance, no retreat. As if surrender had become second nature, as if all hope for rescue had long since withered away. And while the rest of the room turned its back, Elijah, a quiet man in the shadows, looked at the dog with different eyes. Not with pity, but with deep, wordless empathy. Amid the restless crowd, Elijah stood in silence. He wasn't someone who stood out, no fancy suit, no expensive accessories like the others, but there was something different about him. His eyes didn't look at the dog with pity or sorrow. They held something else, something quietly familiar. In the middle of the noise, Elijah saw something in that dog that struck a deep chord, as if somehow he had known those same dark days, the ones filled with abandonment, silence, and being left behind. He couldn't explain the feeling, he just couldn't look away. The dog didn't make a sound, didn't resist, didn't fight. Like a part of Elijah himself, it had already accepted its fate, too tired to run anymore, just like he once had. Something in Elijah's chest tightened. There was an invisible thread connecting them, fragile but unbreakable, a bond only those who had lived through pain could truly understand. He couldn't see every wound in the dog's eyes, but he knew. He knew they were the same, scarred in places no one ever bothered to look. As the auctioneer prepared to wrap things up, the room grew tense. Some people had already turned away, deciding the dog wasn't worth their time. But Elijah didn't move. He hadn't come prepared. He didn't know what he was going to do. But something inside him stirred. Without a word, he stepped forward. A quiet nod, no gestures, no signals, just a simple act of calm certainty. That nod was everything. No rush, no noise, just silence and an unspoken yes. It wasn't just about rescuing a stray dog, it was the marking of a past Elijah could no longer outrun. With every step toward the animal, he felt himself returning to a part of him long forgotten. The wounds of a life lived in quiet suffering, the weight of loneliness, the regret of wrong turns, they all came flooding back. And Elijah knew this act wouldn't just save the dog, it would save him too. No one in the crowd understood the nod. They looked at each other in confusion, not saying a word, but none of them saw the depth in that simple gesture. Elijah wasn't just saving a dog, he was rescuing himself. The truck rattled gently along the empty roads. Elijah said nothing. Neither did the dog. Only the hum of the engine blended with the cold wind slipping through the window crack. In the back, the dog lay still, its eyes tired, its body unresisting. Its hind legs still couldn't hold steady, but at least it no longer had to run quietly, as if the world around them had vanished for just a moment. Under the wintry sky, Elijah reflected on his life. The long, lonely years seemed endless, but something felt different now. He glanced toward the dog, its wounds still fresh across its body, but in its silence he felt something stir. They were alike, though neither of them knew it. Yet two broken pieces that had somehow found each other. The dog no longer growled, it no longer whimpered in pain. And Elijah, who had spent years running from his own past, now felt a strange strength rising from the connection between them. As the truck finally turned down the narrow trail toward the old wooden cabin, Elijah felt a lightness in his chest, not because he had saved the dog, but because the dog, in some quiet, unexpected way, had saved him. They had both endured pain too deep for words, but within that silence a fragile sense of trust had begun to grow. When they reached home, the air inside the cabin was warm and strangely still. The old wooden floors creaked beneath Elijah's footsteps. He set his backpack down and turned toward the back of the truck. The dog looked at him in silence, its eyes still heavy with sadness, but no longer full of fear. Elijah opened the tailgate, and the dog stepped down. Its legs wobbled, but it didn't rush. Somehow it could feel the peace in this place, a home without judgment, without cruelty. Inside the living room, Elijah laid out a soft blanket near the fireplace, where flames flickered gently in the quiet room. He placed a bowl of food in front of the dog, but it didn't move. Its eyes stayed on the bowl, body still tense. Elijah didn't urge it, didn't coax or command. He simply stood by, calm and patient, as if there was no rush, no need to force anything. No sound filled the room, but the soft crackling of the fire and the slow, steady breathing of the dog. Elijah didn't speak, didn't try to encourage. He just sat beside the dog, eyes steady present. Time seemed to slow, and in that moment neither of them needed words to understand. The dog gently leaned into Elijah's leg. A small gesture, but one that carried the weight of something profound. No longer afraid, no longer curled up in defense. Instead, it had found safety in the closeness of this quiet man. And Elijah, after all those years of guarding his heart, felt a warmth blooming again through that simple contact. For the first time in years, Elijah felt tenderness not from words, but from a silence filled with love. The quiet between them wasn't distance. It was a bridge, a silent promise that no matter what waited beyond these walls, they had found a place of peace right here. One afternoon, as the faint light of dusk spilled through the cabin window, Elijah decided to examine the dog's body more closely. He didn't rush. Every movement was slow, gentle, careful not to frighten it. The dog remained still, its eyes quietly tracking each of Elijah's gestures, but showing no resistance. As Elijah softly ran his hands along the dog's body, he noticed a long scar near its hind leg. This wasn't like an ordinary wound. It was deep old, partially healed, yet still lingering, as if the pain had never fully left. Then as his fingers moved down near the leg, he discovered old burn marks. They weren't from fire or sharp objects. They were precise, patterned, as if some cruel instrument burning hot had been pressed into its flesh. Elijah's throat tightened. His hands trembled as they touched the scarred skin. A sharp ache pierced his chest. These wounds weren't just reminders of what the dog had endured. They were echoes of Elijah's own past. He sat there beside the dog, overwhelmed by a wave of emotion. The scars brought back memories not of being hurt, but of standing by silently while others were. What the dog had survived wasn't foreign to him. Elijah had once been part of that same world, a system where people and animals were treated like tools, where the vulnerable had no voice. He had seen cruelty. He had participated in things that could never be undone just to survive. And now, looking at this dog, he felt as if he were finally facing his own past. This dog, with its brutal wounds and silent resilience, had become the living mirror of Elijah's own scars. As if in saving the dog, he was trying to save a part of himself. He couldn't rewrite what had already happened. He couldn't go back and undo the choices he'd made. But this act of kindness was something like redemption, a chance to begin again. The awareness of that truth didn't ease the pain, but it brought a fragile kind of peace. Elijah knew the scars might never fade entirely, but at least now, he could begin a new journey, one where he wasn't just saving the dog. He was learning how to forgive himself. Elijah sat there silently watching the dog curled in the corner of the room. The cabin had grown eerily quiet, but the silence wasn't empty. It was alive with understanding, with awakening. The dog was no longer fearful, no longer recoiling at Elijah's touch. It lay still, its eyes softer now, though still cautious. The trauma it had lived through still clung to its body and soul. And Elijah knew healing would take time. There was no rushing it, no forcing trust. Like the dog, he too was learning to trust again, to open his heart to accept help. This wasn't a story with a clean, sudden ending. Both Elijah and the dog understood that their path forward would be made of small steps of quiet trials. But they had found each other, and in the dim glow of the cabin, something had begun to shift. A slow, silent healing had begun. Not loud, not fast, but deeply real. In the days that followed, the dog gradually began to find a sense of safety around Elijah. It no longer shied away when he approached, and little by little it seemed to learn how to trust him. Each morning when Elijah woke up, the dog would be sitting quietly by the fireplace, its eyes watching him, as if waiting for something. It began to eat properly, no longer leaving food untouched in the bowl like it had in those early days. It started to sleep soundly, curled up in the warm corner of the room, no longer thrashing or waking in the middle of the night. Still, there was a hesitance in the dog, a quiet distance it kept, as if there was a wound too deep to be seen. Elijah noticed the change in every small gesture. But he understood that healing doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. Both the dog and Elijah needed time to let go of invisible wounds, to soften the scars hidden within the soul. One evening, as the light outside began to fade, Elijah saw the dog lying on the rug near the fireplace. It didn't flinch when he approached, though it still kept a slight distance. He sat down beside it, saying nothing. Everything felt still, unhurried, as if they were sharing a quiet space that didn't require words. One night, with moonlight streaming through the window, the world wrapped itself in the gentle hush of late hours. Elijah woke to the familiar silence of the cabin. Beside him the dog lay sleeping, its breathing steady chest, rising and falling in soft rhythm. He looked at it, feeling the peace that now lived in that space. What he once believed impossible, this connection between him and the dog had become real. He realized he was no longer alone. His heart felt warm, not because he had protected the dog, but because of the companionship the dog had quietly given back. It wasn't just a stray anymore, it had become a friend, a part of his life, and from that moment on, they were family. In that moment, a silent harmony settled between man and animal. No words, no expectations, just the presence of one another. There were no sounds, but the fire crackling gently in the stove. No urgency, no demands. The dog lay close beside him, and Elijah felt complete. There was nothing left to say, because this connection wasn't something that needed to be explained. In the stillness, with only the moonlight and the warm breath of a dog beside him, a quiet bond had formed. This wasn't a story about rescue. It was a story about finding one another in a world that so often moves too fast and carries too much darkness. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Elijah knew that well, even though the dog had now found safety in this little home. Even though the two had begun to connect. The journey of healing was far from over. Saving the dog wasn't just about giving it shelter, a place to escape the pain it had once endured. More importantly, it was about Elijah healing the wounds within his own heart. He had lived in solitude for years, avoiding emotional ties, trying not to face a past he'd long buried. But this dog, with all its scars, had taught him something unexpected. Healing doesn't just come from helping others, it's also a path to discovering yourself. With each passing day, Elijah began to realize that his life no longer had to be a chain of gray, empty days, locked inside sadness and regret. Moments began to return, moments filled with warmth and quiet joy, feelings he thought were lost forever, and the dog, though it never spoke a word, taught him how to love again with every glance, every gesture. They were two beings who had once carried pain, but together they found peace. This is a story that continues, a journey of redemption not just for the dog, but for the man who hadn't had someone to share his life with for so long. They found each other in an unexpected moment, and now every step forward is a step toward something new, a shared path, a journey of healing and growth for both of them. No one knows what lies ahead, but Elijah and the dog both know they won't walk it alone. Humans and animals can heal one another. Sometimes saving another soul is the very way we begin to find ourselves again. That simple act, rescuing a stray dog, or just offering a silent nod at an auction, can open the door to a healing we never saw coming. And sometimes the broken pieces of life find each other to form something whole, something meaningful. This journey was never just about saving the dog. It was always about saving himself.